Josh Rowe. Thanks for joining us today on Real Insight. Your resume is so long that I'm not even going to bother to explain what it is that you're doing. I'm going to pass it over to you to frame that up. Thanks for being here. Josh, give us a snapshot as to who you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. It's exciting to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's been an interesting and long career I've had. I suppose I'd sum it up by saying I've been lucky enough to have worked at the intersection of this thing called the internet very, very early on in my career and the innovation that stemmed from it. So very early on, that was kind of back in the mid to late 90s, that was building out really interesting websites and other things like that, and e-commerce sites. And right through to quite recently working on things around generative AI. But in between, I've managed to work for some of the largest corporations in Australia, ANZ Bank, Medibank, Australia Post, but also I've started up a few of my own startup businesses.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I want to have a chat about, probably to kick it off, because you've been involved in a bunch of startups, but then you're also actively invested in a bunch of startups. What is a good startup? What does a good startup business look like, and what sort of stuff do you look for?
Yeah, so it's if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be be very well off.
Elon Musk.
Be Elon Musk potentially. I don't know if I'd want to be that man, but certainly I'd be well off. It's venture capital investing, even at the kind of the size I do it at, is a risk. Is something that you go into knowing full well that not every startup's going to succeed. And when I look at particular potential investments that I take, I look at not only the idea, but I look at who the people are who are behind it, and their vision behind what they're trying to succeed, and also some early traction or demonstration that they're trying to get some runs on the board with whatever they're trying to build out.
Is it a people thing more than a tech thing? Particularly if it's a tech startup, is it about the people?
People is really important.
Yeah.
Like the number of times I've seen, and this is both as a founder of myself, but also as an investor, that I've seen the connection between investors and startup founders come together at in-person events. That's where the nexus seems to happen, because it's that kind of establishment of that. I understand what you're on about. I understand that you not only got something which is functional and great because there's potential customers who will buy this thing and pay for it, but also that you've got the drive to execute it and make it happen. And I can see that I can see the energy, I can see your tenacity, I can see all the things that live behind you that are more than just perhaps your resume, perhaps what you've worked on in the past, whether you're a solopreneur or a startup founder, or even previous corporate entrepreneur type person. But it's that ability to connect between the founder and the investor to say, hey, I've got what it takes.
Yeah, because being a tech guy myself, like I've always toyed with the idea of being involved in a startup, or it's a bit romantic, I think, to think about what it's like to build something from the ground up. But at the same token, my brain can't come to terms with what you need to know and what the size of that risk is. From my point of view, I'm thinking, well, what happens if it all goes wrong? What happens if you create a startup or invest in a startup and it doesn't work? Do you just pack it up and walk away? Is that what happens? Have you ever been involved in a situation where it hasn't worked?
Yeah, absolutely. And not every startup I've been involved in has been kind of a glowing success story. There's been ones where, I've either invested my own time, my own money, and it's either, in some cases, it's either died with a very clear death, and a flat line. In other cases, it just kind of ambles along, and they're the ones where you kind of go, what's going on there? And sometimes, founders are like, can we have some more money to tip in for a follow-on round, or do this or do that? And it's that, well, what do we do next? But if I reflect on my own experience, my very first foray to getting involved in a startup was actually back when I was at university. And so I actually started my very first business. I was studying. I wasn't even studying. I think I was studying civil engineering discovered this thing called the internet. And when I say discovered, I didn't invent it. I just
early on.
I stumbled onto the internet.
Yep.
Back when there was literally 30 million people globally using the internet, and so I thought this is really cool, and I literally started selling website pages and e-commerce sites for people in Australia to say, hey, get online. And it was just while I was studying. So for me, it was a side hustle, but it was my first business, and I was taking paying customers.
Yeah.
And that was amazing because it would really taught me how to understand the customer in a market where there wasn't a real good understanding of the product, which was this thing called online. No one understood it.
No one got it. And I remember like getting nostalgic. I go back to my first foray into not the internet, but being connected online. And it's 1986 for me. And I've got a Commodore 64. And I watched Weird Science. And I was introduced to the modem. And back then I was like, okay, well, what do you do with the modem? So Mum bought me a modem from Maxwell's in Abbotsford, which was like the place to go for computer stuff at the time. And I used to connect to bulletin boards. And there was one that I used to connect to that was called The Island, BBS. And it was literally just people posting stuff, and it was not in real time, and it was there, and I didn't really get it. But when I go back and I think, if I'd been smart enough to think of, creating a startup or something for the internet that was coming, because the bulletin board connectivity was like internet, 0.05.
That was social media.
Yeah.
Back then. I was on kind of BBS at a similar kind of time too. And for me, it was Melbourne PC user group type thing, and same kind of thing, dial in, connect. It was kind of revolved around not just messaging, but downloading files and getting the latest, free software, freemium, can't remember the names, shareware and all that kind of stuff. Yep. It was all about, software exchange. So it was the movement from swapping floppy disks to then moving to online exchange of software. That was back then. It was the using online BBS as a way of swapping files.
Yeah. So freaky stuff. I remember then my first internet experience, because I didn't have the internet at home until I was probably 20. I didn't necessarily come from a very wealthy home, so that was a luxury. But I remember going to an internet cafe in Greensborough, and this is probably 1996 now. It cost me $15, I think, for 10 minutes internet use, and we did nothing because we didn't know what to do. Like I was an X-Files fan. We were looking at X-Files websites and things like that. But when did it occur to you that the internet can be so much more than just like what it was for me? I didn't have that vision into this is going to be something that, that is going to change lives and you can build ecosystems in this. When did that happen for you?
1992.
Yep.
The Barcelona Olympics.
Right.
So my father at this stage was held a staff job at RMIT University. And luckily enough, what that came with was a modem connection into RMIT's internet connectivity. So basically, for me, my internet cafe was at home, which was amazing. And back then, I don't know if you remember, but sports telecasts were delayed.
Yeah.
So, unless you knew a phone number of someone over in the other country, there was no real way for you to find out the live, what was happening until the newspapers came out the next day. And so for me, suddenly I was connected through this thing called the internet. It was a green screen. Like I was browsing the internet using this thing called Links, it's a web browser. Yeah. And I was on there and I was able to go through and find out that this swimmer, Kieran Perkins, had absolutely smashed the 1500 world record and won gold. And so, and I was able to find that out before anyone else. And I'm just like, and it was that point where I've gone, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is a fundamental breakthrough technology. And, I've only had that happen to me twice in my career that time. And now with this latest round of technology, generative AI.
With the AI stuff.
Yeah, but that was 1992 was that fundamental point where I've gone, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, and that didn't happen to me until significantly later. And by the time that was happening, I was a musician and I was just like out doing that sort of stuff. And the internet was something I revisited much later and realised I'm a bit late to the party. But the people that were there, and jumped on early, they really made a good success story out of that. Another success story from your history, Realize. Tell us about Realize, how that came about and where that ended up.
I would say one thing just on your last comment. I don't think anyone's ever too late to anything.
Oh, I'm very judgmental of myself. So that's probably why.
So I would say you're never too late to any opportunity. And sometimes some of the biggest success stories are sometimes the fast followers who actually jump on and they learn from something that's already been done by someone else and do it better.
We sort of saw that with the dot-com bubble, right? And then out of that crash, the emergence of things like Facebook and Google and so do it better, is the secret. Realize, tell us about Realize.
Yeah, so Realize was a really interesting opportunity for me. I'd just finished up working with Medibank, doing a really interesting role there, heading up their digital team there, doing some really exciting stuff from an enterprise perspective. And then an opportunity came up. I was introduced to some founders, some co-founders of this business who had a kind of a nub of an idea. And the idea was, we think we can match up buyers and sellers in the real estate marketplace in Australia. And the original idea was to kind of create a preferences type app website where you kind of like, buyers like, oh, here's the things I want, and sellers kind of present them together. Now, what became very obvious was when I joined the business was it wasn't just that which was what potential customers wanted. There was a little kind of feature that they'd been the existing group of people had been kind of running along the side but hadn't given much attention to, which was the prediction of what properties would sell for.
Right.
I suppose without making this too much of a long story, the founders or the original founders of this business had partnered with RMIT University, which is where I did my undergrad computer science degree, and had basically started developing an algorithm using artificial intelligence, machine learning, to predict what properties would sell for. And it was incredibly accurate, like within 5% of what properties sold for, right across Australia, regardless of whether it was a private sale or auction.
Yeah.
And this was a stage, this is 2014 we're talking about, when underquoting was rife, especially in auctions, where, the price that was quoted pre-auction and what they sold for would be sometimes 10, 15, 20% difference. Yeah. And so people were rocking up to these auctions, buyers, and they'd be just frustrated and they just hated it. And so, and there was no rules, regulations.
Yeah, back then it was open slather.
It was open slather.
Yeah.
So, and so for me, it was one of those moments where I saw the need. I saw a market which was all driven by, the main real estate websites, and even today I'd say this, are mostly focused on the people who pay them. The people who pay them are the real estate agents and the people who sell houses. People who buy houses don't pay those real estate portals.
Yeah.
And so they're the third customer. They're not the first or the second customer.
Yeah.
And so there was a real opportunity to represent home buyers, hence Realize was born.
And I guess we can see that now, like that, whatever that technology started off as, but now it's sort of incorporated in any major real estate website, right? Where I can put in the address of my property and, here's what we're valuing the property at based on so-and-so data. And that's updated, I think, sometimes every 2 weeks or monthly, and the value of your property changes. That would have been the same sort of stuff that was going on back then, yeah? Yeah.
And so what one of the first things that I did when we launched Realize was we turned around this whole idea of keeping prices secret, because back then it wasn't necessary that the real estate agent had to disclose any kind of formal quotation. The rules have since changed then. I played a role in seeing that there would be legal and regulation changes in Victoria in particular. But what we saw was that we saw better transparency of prices to the public. Yeah. And we did this in a few different ways. So first, apart from just having every single property that's on the market, here's a prediction, we started doing leaderboards. So every single week we'd go, okay, who's actually the best real estate agents? And so we'd actually go out there and we'd publish media releases. These would get published in the Financial Review, the the TV news would pick it up, radio programs, John Fane here in Victoria, you name it, everyone would pick it up and they love this. People love talking about property.
Real estate agents would have loved it too because they're not the most egotistical people in the world.
I was going to say, there was one real estate agent in particular here in Melbourne who literally got in fact, one here in Melbourne, one in Sydney too, and they both got the kind of them being the number one in both Melbourne and Sydney for accurate, them being as accurate as they can in providing an estimation of what the property's going to sell for pre-auction. And they published it. They republished it as their own thing. One of them put it up on their front screen of their actual physical store. I'm like, that is awesome. Whereas the reverse was we had some where they threatened us and they said, you were... they actually,
because you're telling the truth.
well, here's the thing: you can't. Well, they said we're being defamatory for calling them out for being inaccurate, and we're like, well, that's factual.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a good idea them threatening, making that threat because we just passed it straight back to the newspapers. And the newspapers. It was even more stories, and they're like, oh, who sent that legal threat? You're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so and what this meant for us as an organisation was we. As a startup, we got this tremendous amount of publicity, and by the end of it, there was over 100 different mainstream media articles. And if I was to give any advice to anyone who's running a startup, you're getting a startup going, it's about getting your product, your service, your offering, not just in front of potential customers, but also get in front of the people where they are, your potential customers. Live and talk. So, and for real estate, that was mainstream media.
Yeah.
And it was tremendously hard, buying that kind of media, especially when you're kind of going up against, say, realestate.com.au and domain.com.au was very hard. So we just went straight in there and we hit the main TV channels, radio channels, and just were there as an advocate for buyers.
Advice for startups, because you just mentioned a point that sort of triggered a thought in my mind. When you're creating a startup, what is the importance of how things happen in sequence? And by that, what I mean is there's obviously an idea. When do you start giving birth to the idea and using the idea to find, other employees and investors and things before you need to actually say, well, now here's the product? Can you get investors based on an idea and a conceptual idea, or do you need to actually start to have business plan and product in order to start finding your first round investors?
The answer is both. You can do both. I mean, it's up to how much you want to do yourself, for instance, how much investment you need, depending on the idea, I suppose. But I suppose as much time as you can bootstrap it, i.e. pay for it yourself and get things going, is a good idea. What I'd say also is you need to also think about whether there's any, say, time to market risks, like if you want to get there faster than someone else. So if I take Realize as an example, we had a real time to market thing where, I joined the business in April 2014. Our goal was to have it in market by spring that year because that's as in the app, the website, and that was really important because we just needed to be there for the rush of spring sales.
Yeah.
And so that was the time to market was important. And so from my point of view, having investors on board was really important because I had the necessary capital to have a software development team, and then I engaged a nimble PR firm who were able to help us and go to market and then be able to get it out there and be able to reach our target customers.
Awesome. Still scary for me and probably something I won't do, but awesome advice for anyone that's interested. I would like to flip the topic to what it is that we're really here to talk about today, and that is what is fast becoming a business for you and a passion for me, and that is AI. And what a buzzword at the moment. What I really want to try and do is first frame the context of AI so that people know what we're talking about. Because the one thing I'm finding with the industry at the moment is AI is, like, as far as I know, there's still no AI, right? Like we're talking about an emergence of. What's the difference between a really intelligent, effective algorithm and AI, and how do we define where we are in that timeline currently?
Well, I suppose the first thing to call out is AI is definitely not a new concept. It's been around since the 1950s, 60s, the Turing test, if everyone wants to Google it up and see the kind of the early development of what artificial intelligence first was. And even this current form of what AI is, everyone talks about generative AI, which produces these texts and images and other things. That's even something that's been in development over many years. In fact, the last kind of decade or so, that work has been going. It's only kind of hit a point now where it's become mainstream, where people have gone, oh, this is actually useful.
Yeah.
And so AI is absolutely something that has been in use for a long time. And in fact, if I think about all the different other words that AI has been used to describe what AI has done, there's been lots of people who've worked in, say, the data world with particularly enterprise people who work with data warehouses and intelligent-based systems to kind of work out and do data analytics. That kind of work has led to where we are now, about having intelligent ways to I suppose do regression models and predict and give a sense of use effectively mathematics and computer operations to work out what the next most likely thing is going to be. If I take Realize as a great example, Realize was and is an AI algorithm that predicts the most likely number a property will sell for.
Yeah,
that's it. Now the secret sauce behind that is something that uses a combination of different factors and a whole bunch of things to come up with that. But what that does is it's able to do something that is valuable for that the home buyer. And so when people think about generative AI and go, oh, how the hell does that work? Things like generative AI, when we apply it to, say, text, something like OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT, is trained, and the word trained just means learns, sucks in a whole lot of data from, effectively the internet, and then it just does a really good job of predicting what's the next word going to be. So when you ask it a question, it goes, I think the next word is going to be. And it's a predictor. It's like it's a generator of the next word.
Yeah, it's not inherently intelligent, is it? It's like it appears as intelligence, but all it's doing is taking information that already exists and putting it into another structure.
Yeah, and in fact, there's certainly some limitations when it comes to some of these kind of new tools, which over time should be improved. But because they're trained on data which is available on the internet, the same biases which exist in both text and image and the like,
and just the human culture
exist there. So a real example was that the other day, a lady who was had a Asian appearance asked one of these kind of AI avatar websites, can you improve, touch up my photo? Mm-hmm. And the touch up turned her into a Caucasian person. Yeah, right. And it's just like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, that's just like, how inappropriate is that? It's just not like, that was not asked for. And same goes for anything written in text. And, there's a famous case where there was a lawyer in the US who decided to use ChatGPT to write up their case for a court. Now, they didn't go and check what ChatGPT wrote, and they submitted it into court. And sure enough, the case law that it referred to was just made up. Yeah. Now, this is a known thing, not just with ChatGPT, but many kind of AI models called hallucination, where if it doesn't know, it just kind of goes and makes it up. Now, it's completely very easy, if you know how, to basically put a command in or a prompt to say to these AI models, don't make things up. Or in fact, even ask a follow-up question going, how much of that is correct? Or can you just review your own work? Cite
the references or something.
Yeah, cite the references, review your own work. Does that provide all the right perspectives? And so you can kind of go back and go, just like you would when, say, if you imagine you were giving some work to someone else in the business, you were checking their work. You shouldn't just take the work done by...
it's peer reviewed.
You need to peer review it. And sometimes... in fact, not sometimes, I would suggest all the time, unless you have domain knowledge in the work you're asking to be done, you shouldn't trust it. I think you should also always get it to be tested and checked by someone or someone else, whether it's another AI model or a human, to say, is this right?
Yeah, someone that's familiar with that space in particular. Businesses are rushing to adopt AI in multiple different fashions. We use a little bit of it here. The stuff that makes obvious sense to me is the use of ChatGPT just to cut down on the laborious typing of monotonous text. Sometimes using things like Midjourney to generate conceptual images and things for clients. Where are the places that businesses can get good yield on AI tools now? And then where are the things that are probably not worth going to just yet?
So you're spot on, Mike, with administrative related tasks is you just jump straight in. And what I'd encourage most people to do is put the tools in the hands of the people who are already doing the work. Just like before I said, where it's important to get people who have the domain expertise to check things. It's the people who are in those administrative tasks who you can actually help them be more efficient, do more work by giving them these tools, because they can be the ones checking to go, is it delivering me the right answer? If you think that, say, ChatGPT and these other tools are a way of removing the requirement for needing those kind of admin type tasks being done, and you can just kind of hand up to someone else in your business, then you're likely to miss the quality check.
Yeah.
So the really, I suppose the important message there is it can enhance the productivity, the throughput of people who are already doing this kind of work. The other one is right across different industries. There's a great opportunity to broaden perspectives and ask more questions around things. And really, I'd be using these kind of generative AI tools as a way of going, but what if if I had someone else who could just ask me a few more questions just to check my thinking? Have I considered all the aspects of this? So, from my perspective, my current role in working in product management in the consulting industry, I really look at I'm constantly looking at are we solving clients' problems? So I constantly am always thinking right, and whether it's at a high level going, is the business problem considered? Have we considered all the elements of the business problem? Are all the plans and the details there from a macro point of view, right down to onto an execution point of view? What does my product manager, engineers and others need to know to execute on the work? How do we describe it? How do we make sure it's tested and executed really well? How do we make sure that the client has a really good way of delivering on this so it's operational? You can basically ask this stuff and say, what are all the checks and balances we need to have? And I'd even encourage people to even look at some of these AI models of almost checking existing work you've already got. You might have, say, policies.
Yep.
Take a policy of you might have a OH&S policy or something, and you might go, oh, geez, is this correct? And you might just say, this is our OH&S policy. Say ChatGPT, for example. We're a business based in Melbourne, Victoria, and we need to make sure that there's this new law that's come out or new requirements, Fair Work Act, and we know that ChatGPT only goes to 2021. So you tell it, you go, right, here's the new law, and whether you point it to a URL or paste in the content, you go, here it is here. Can you just tell us whether we're up to speed? And ChatGPT will go, well, firstly, I'm not a lawyer, like it's good. Yeah. It's got some good controls there. It's actually really good. I'm not a lawyer, but here's my perspective.
Yeah.
And then you go, cool. And then you might even say, is there anything else I should think of? Now, these aren't replacements for the humans that do these jobs today. They're not replacements for lawyers, for accountants, for all the other professions there. I would definitely wouldn't be using it as your kind of medical advice or stuff. But it's a step to say, what should I be thinking about? And certainly, going back to startup founders, it's a good way to test things out, because sometimes it goes, have you thought about, or have you heard of? And you go, oh no, I hadn't.
A friend of mine who is returning back to the workforce after 15 years, she's been raising children, was using it to train herself in interviews. So she'd be like, I'm going for a job as a so-and-so. Can you set me up with a pretend interview? And then it would coach her through, perhaps you should say this instead, or and really handy. Like, again, not something that I would think of, but it's got all the access to the information out there. So why not take advantage of that? Where are the traps and the pitfalls in rushing to this stuff?
So I think another key aspect of generative AI is the tools that you have to be wary of. A few things there. So I've already talked about the hallucination effect, and to be wary that sometimes these generative AI models will make things up. So you need to be explicit, and the tighter your questions are, the less likely it's going to make it up. If you ask a really open question, it can go broad. If you ask it tightly and say, make sure it's I literally will write the phrase, don't make things up.
Yeah.
It must be factual. If you don't know something, ask me.
Yeah, right.
I write a little in the prompt, if you don't know something, ask me, and I'll clarify something or help you find it for you. So I teach it as I talk to the AI as if I'm talking to a person.
Yeah.
I even say please and thank you, which apparently
Just force of habit, right?
force of habit. But the other things to think about too, I suppose, two key aspects I'd call out would be, I've talked about biases already in models, but also ethical concerns, making sure that anything you use generative AI models for, you do so in a way that considers the appropriate ethics of using them. So what's the, are you doing this in a way that is taking advantage of other people's work, for example?
Yeah.
And just making sure that you're appropriately attributing any work you might be doing using generative AI models. The other one to consider also is how when looking at generative AI content, need to consider who the end users are and how they're likely to use it. So it needs to be fit for them. So it's quite easy to write content in particular, whether it's words or text, which doesn't sound like you. It's quite easy to go and then say writer, whatever, and people know straight away. I've been on the end of some job applications quite recently where people have said, hey, I want to come and work with you. And it's so clear that they've just banged it into ChatGPT. I'm like,
You can actually ask ChatGPT to write you something in the style of someone.
yeah. So these people haven't even done that, which is hilarious. And I'm just like, geez, you could have just done that extra step. So it's not that hard to go that extra step and put the effort into it. And in fact, I would even suggest, using some of these tools are great, but put your own touch to it.
Yeah.
That's where the value comes from. Make it human. You are the human element is the bit that puts the bow on the top. If you just are sending out content which is purely generated content, then you're just missing the opportunity. You're just one of that's commodity. Be the extra on top.
Yeah. Are there tools around yet to work out whether something has been generated by AI? Like I'm picturing myself, I spent 10 years lecturing at university, and I'm imagining that 90% of assignments now that are being submitted are going to have a good count of GPT stuff in it. Can you check that? Can you check that something's been generated?
There's some. And I think there's a bit of an arms race to catch up. So, the tool I see used the most in universities here in Australia, Turn It In, is playing catch up in that area. What I'm seeing, I have 3 children, all in kind of mixture of high school and primary school, and certainly in the high school mode, they've actually changed the way they do assessments now. And so rather than doing their key learning tasks, their KLTs, as something they might have previously done, at home, they now do it in class.
Yeah, right.
And so basically, it means that the work. The brains that they're working in, there's no kind of, whether there's I don't know if the school physically blocks ChatGPT or it's literally just line of sight because of the teacher being there. But regardless, it's a very clear message. And in fact, the way that my children have spoken to me, it's, hey, that's so we can't use ChatGPT. Now, I find it interesting in the sense that, my oldest child, I was speaking to him the other day, I said, look, ChatGPT isn't bad. It's like your calculator.
Yeah.
If you know how you got to the point where now you can use your calculator, that's fine. First principles. So, my original first undergraduate degree was engineering. So I'm all about getting things right and understanding things from first principles. So I think people who are now studying and learning need to understand how things developed from a first principles perspective. And same goes for, using these AI tools. The second one is on images.
Yep.
So they're already talking about putting in kind of digital watermarks into images that will start saying, oh, this is an AI generated whatever photograph, or things where it's, you go, okay, that one's done whatever. So there's some talk about that. I think that'll be harder with text, but we'll see how it goes.
I always like to tinker in my mind with the concept, like what you were talking about, knowing first principles. And I use the example, I did a computer science degree, my early 20s. I was always into music. I went back and did a music degree in my mid-20s. And I was brought into wanting to create. I was never a good player of music. I was never disciplined enough to learn an instrument. I was really never disciplined enough to learn first principles, right? And then in the mid-90s, computer software came out that you could generate music with. And for me, that was like the moment for me, because not only was I not really good at learning and retaining information, but I wasn't really inspired to want to play, but I wanted to make music. I wanted to perform. I wanted to do that sort of stuff. And then when I found software that could help me do this, that was something that gave me a set of tools that I wasn't already prepared with. But the backside of that is when you're studying music with a bunch of people that have spent 10 and 15 years practicing and playing, it's like, well, you're not a real musician because you don't know how to play and you don't know how to read music. And so then there becomes this old school, new school thought of, if you don't know first principles in detail, then you don't have the right to actually jump into, the second level. Is AI going to be the thing where people go, well, actually, now it's not about the knowledge that I retain. It's not about how much stuff I can remember. It's about what I've got access to.
Yeah, so it's really, I find the creative side of AI incredibly interesting. And, Google just released something the other day, and it was, it's basically a text-based kind of AI generation tool, and they were demonstrating, one of the use cases they were demonstrating was how it could help kind of build out a rap.
Yeah, right.
And they actually used I can't remember which musician it was who was involved in doing it.
I think there was a Jay-Z one.
Was it Jay-Z? Yeah, it was probably Jay-Z.
Yeah. Where it sounds like Jay-Z. Like you would not know.
And it's really interesting because it was, but they actually had an artist, the key was they had an artist involved. And so it was almost like showing how the artist would pick it up and then do the next thing. So it's almost like get the concepts, get the ideas right, then build on it. And so I still think there's this element of building to make it something, and generative AI helps you collaborate, build it out. So I think technology has brought us, putting aside AI, technology has brought the music industry leaps and bounds in all different kinds of ways.
In the way people consume music, in the way people connect with music, particularly like the thing that I've always loved is the way that it allows you to connect with the artist.
Yeah.
You could never tell the artist that you like them. You could never, with social media, the way that you can connect with an audience. But then let's look at the stuff that's going on at Hollywood at the moment. Right? We've got writers on strike and people worried about preserving their likeness, with things like we've seen with this Jay-Z clip. We've got, Donald Trump videos that aren't real. We've got Joe Biden videos that aren't real. We've got famous celebrities. What does that look like?
Yeah.
What is
and so I reckon there's a few different issues there to tackle. So I'd say for those who are already known for content, for their words, for their voice, for their image, still or physical moving, I think preferences should be, people's preferences should be respected legally.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is if people want to own their image in the ways that they own their images today in real life, then they should have the ability to own them legally in AI.
Yeah.
So that in the same way that if someone's track gets mixed up, mixed up, probably the wrong word for it, but incorporate.
It's like having a passport, right?
But if you incorporate, say, someone else's music into a sample. There you go. There's a word for it.
Yeah, sample.
Sample. That's it.
Yeah.
Like if you sample someone's track into your own music, then generally you have to pay a royalty.
Correct.
So with AI, that whole debate has not happened. So if you're, regardless of how people's words, images, whatever likenesses has come into play, that has to be respected. Now, I expect a whole lot of artists will want to monetize that.
100%.
They'll be like, geez, I mean, you already look at it. You can see it in Hollywood now.
Well,
where
James Earl Jones. So I'm a Star Wars fan, and James Earl Jones signed over his voice to be Darth Vader forever.
Yeah.
So
the latest Indiana Jones, there's Harrison Ford looking as young as ever.
Yeah, de-aging.
And then de-aging. Same goes for Carrie Fisher, who's bless her soul, was passed away, but is still there in movies, which is just from a fan point of view, it's great. And, I just hope that and want to make sure that these people are getting, or their estates are getting paid for it. For those starting out, though, what this means is, well, what happens? What has, so I get the writers and actors who are saying, well, hang on, we're just new to this. Are we going to be replaced? And what I would hope to see is that, that AI is not a job killer for those creatives. I want to, I'd love to be able to see that there's the opportunity for them to level up and to be able to use their skills in a way that harnesses the technology, that doesn't kind of rid them. Because I still believe there's a fundamental role that humans play in being creative.
For sure. And I think even like defining the difference between human creative work and AI creative work, like there's space for both, because there's some stuff that the computers are going to come up with that no human would have ever imagined. But then are they ever going to be really able to capture the emotion and the experience? And art is about life. It's about life experience. If you're not lived life, well, it's a different type of art. But not to say there's not a place for it. It was when I first started making electronic music, everyone was like, ugh, like electronic music, that's cheating. That's computers making music. Well, there's still a person behind it. The computer's the tool. So I think using AI as a tool is really what we're talking about, right? It's not going to replace anyone, but if everyone can enhance based on access to that tool.
I wonder if people, the singers complained when the first musical instruments came about. It's kind of like every advent of new technology leads to detractors.
Yeah.
It's like I'm sure when went from horses to cars. All the people who rode horses are like, cars, they're terrible. We hate cars.
Yeah.
Now it's
bad for the environment. No one's ever going to take them up.
And now it's cars to petrol cars to electric cars. And there's There's always every new technology will generally have detractors, but generally these things will have, if they've got value, they'll have some kind of, they'll seek a happy medium where they get the right balance between delivering that value. Obviously, there's some kind of commercial model, but also delivering doing it in the right ethical way, within the right boundaries. And what I'm seeing there, from a societal point of view, but also in a governmental point of view, that there's a real interest in getting all those settings right. And so, especially in Australia, I see that there's kind of very early step to say, right, what are the kind of things we need to think about? What are the things, how do we make sure that Skynet doesn't occur, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that was sort of going to be my next question. I'll make that question too, because there's one to fit in between. What role does enterprise have in what's happening with AI, and when does government or governance need to step in and be involved? Because it's obviously like private equity doesn't care, right? They just want to generate revenue. So they're going to run with it as fast as they can. What needs to happen to make sure this is happening both ethically, but that we don't end up with a Skynet?
So there's already been one case where a large organisation, and I've literally, the name of that organisation has slipped my mind at the moment. If only I had a little AI here to tell me.
Put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments.
Yeah.
But what they had was, early on, they had some of their, I think it was their software engineers might have uploaded some proprietary code to, say, ChatGPT and did other stuff. And so effectively they were publishing it out and allowing it to be shared and allowed the one of these generative AI models to learn from it. Now that's not a great case, because a great thing, because effectively, put AI aside again, you're effectively pushing proprietary information outside of enterprise firewall, and you're giving it effectively giving it away for others to see, and so that's just not on. And so what I'm seeing is large organisations, enterprises, both in Australia and overseas, are seeing generative AI as a great opportunity to do work, but they're doing it within their own four walls or doing it within a managed environment. So they're using these large language models, and they're doing it in a way that they put a kind of a safe around it, but they're doing things which are low risk.
Yeah.
So a great example is ANZ. They just launched a new service internally called ZGPT, and it's basically their own version of ChatGPT, but it's all trained on basically kind of information which is kind of helps them understand, help and other local kind of information. So they deliberately haven't gone into financial transactions, personal information or anything. They've just they've touched the edge. And they're doing this as a way of learning and understanding the technology, and to make sure that they do it in a way that through testing and learning, that they put the right governance and controls around that. And that'll be something that the majority of organisations will need to do to make sure that things are controlled. And I would actually provide advice to, regardless of whether you're the top end of town or even you're in a small business, you have information which is proprietary to your business, and you want to make sure that the way that you're using it with any of these tools is kept secret to you.
Yeah.
And so just need to, even if you are, say, using ChatGPT, there's little settings where you can go, don't use my data for training. There's a little go to settings and just go, delete my data after 30 days, don't share it. Right. So, and just some basic stuff.
Yep.
By default, that's
it's not on.
It's not on, so you've got to turn it off. So some of that stuff. Now, over time, more and more solutions will come where you can basically keep your data local to your own, whether it's your own personal machine or your own enterprise machine, so that it's not even going up into the cloud. Whether things are in the cloud or not, I think is just a security question.
Yeah.
It's up to each kind of organisation to establish the rules there. I think the cloud is kind of, I suppose, established enough and understood enough by enterprises. But certainly people need to understand and use common sense and good governance around data and what they share with these generative AI models.
Does the government have a role in this? Does the government need to get involved?
I think governments absolutely need to play a role in good practices for generative AI, or in just, I would say, AI in general. And the kind of things I would expect governments to do, not just locally here, but across the world, are things to put in good frameworks around ethics, good management of data, and just ensuring that knowing how, there's some who are predicting that that AI is likely to become sentient within the next decade or two. Now, I can't give you my own view on that because I'm not close enough to the different models that all these organisations are developing that I can say that that's right or wrong. But if that's the case, then that's something where you want to go, okay, well, if that's the case, if there is going to be, if these models are going to be able to think for themselves and go beyond just kind of, a human requiring to ask questions and come back, then what? What controls need to be in place, and what things do we need to put in place so we don't have obviously everyone thinks of Terminator, but whatever it is, and it could be, let's make it really boring. Let's make a much more boring thing. What if there was, that there was a financial institution that was using some kind of AI capability to, I don't know, work out the best way of managing, interest payments or for home loan accounts or savings accounts or whatever. And what if it started getting it monotone and started doing things in a way that did, decide to go, oh, you know what, I'm going to start
making some cash,
or doing something else. I'm going to fund some more CPU and replicate myself for something else, or basically, what if it went off program? Effectively, decided to develop its own personality and did its own thing. Now, I think that doesn't exist today. That's not a real life thing. Anyone who suggests it does is telling fibs. Yeah. But it's it's something to, from a policy point of view at a government level, to think about, and that's just one of the issues from a government point of view. I think ethics, bias, proper use, all those kind of things are really important aspects that governments need to think about, because just leaving them to industry alone will get a mixture of responses. And like you said, some people will just go for profit. Yeah. So it's about saying, right, how do we create a place where we say, okay, this is our base level of expectation when it comes to doing this kind of work.
Because who's the boss of OpenAI? What's his name?
Sam Altman.
Sam Altman. And he carries around a blue backpack now, which apparently has a detonator for all of the primary OpenAI servers. So if something was to go wrong, he pulls out the button and kills all the servers.
I have never heard that story.
Yeah, it's whether or not it's an internet meme or not, but yeah, anywhere Sam Altman goes, he's got a blue backpack, and in that blue backpack is the button that kills all the servers.
I met him recently in Melbourne.
Oh wow. Really?
He did not have a blue backpack on.
No?
So I'm going to have to check this out.
Could just be an internet meme, but it's a thing.
We'll put that in the comments too. There you go. does the blue backpack exist? But you know what? Having I suppose it's better than having, Sarah Connor and come back after you, I suppose, then.
And that's, that's one that I want to spend a couple of minutes on, right? So everyone's guessing what's going to happen. Human nature is to assume the worst, right? So it's Terminator, it's Skynet, I think the thing that drives people's fear in that is the rate at which if an AI became sentient, the rate at which it could make decisions is the thing that's really scary, right? Because by the time we've thought up an evil plan and put it into place and hatched it as a human, an AI has done that and it's over. But there's two futures, right? So there's Terminator future and Skynet and AI. And then there's like the Star Trek future and the Star Wars future where we've got AIs helping us out, living our lives alongside us. Or the Matrix, where it all goes haywire and they fight back. Let's guess. Like, what do you think will happen? And it's a guess.
I think it's going to be more of an Iron Man universe where it's like which bit of good and bad.
Yeah,
so it's very much Jarvis is there, but it's going to be a bit of turmoil and.
But does AI think, what do I need these people for now? Like, what do I need these bags of meat around for? If they're thinking, like, if an AI is thinking, well, let me have a look back now that I'm intelligent and see what these people have done with this planet and to each other over the past, 10,000 years. Are they really worth keeping around? We've trained this AI to be like us.
Oh, so I was always a fan of Asimov growing up. So I read all of his books, including I, Robot, which established all the fundamental rules of robotics, which basically, effectively is do no harm to humans.
Yeah.
And it's recently I just watched the Megan movie, which is about the.
I have not seen that.
So this is about a doll who's been built out of a big kind of toy manufacturer and basically has AI capabilities, a bit of learning mode. It's been trained to join up to a child and then pair with a child and then basically effectively be obedient to that child. And in this case, spoiler alert for someone no one's who's seen Megan yet, but this doll ends up going to such an extent to protect this child that starts basically harming other humans to protect this child.
Yeah.
When these humans weren't going to kill this child, they were just bullying or doing other stuff. But it's
just acting on its programming.
Well, so I would say, hang on, acting on programming. Why is it killing a human? So in a couple of occasions, it actually kills.
Right.
It kills. So the child is paired with gets bullied on a camp or something occasion, and so it basically takes out the other child by pushing him down a hill, and the kid gets run over by a car and that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, well, hang on, and so I'm like, that's kind of going a bit too far. And if I was that actual AI model, I'd be going, well, hang on, consequences. Wouldn't you think that you'd eventually get done for that? Like, I won't explain the rest of the movie because I'm sure there'll be some people who haven't seen it, but it's worth watching because it's kind of, I think there's a few plot holes in that, but I think that's a great example of a dumb AI because it's that AI which apparently is really great at learning just didn't see the end coming, didn't see where it finally ended, and I'm just like, so I suppose any AI who thinks that they can dominate on their own existence, you kind of go, well, how? What's their, and I know the Matrix tells us this kind of fantasy world of, well, they ended up working out that they could live off the energy of our kind of our heat of our bodies giving birth and going down tubes and all that kind of stuff. But it's I think we're a long way off that kind of thing happening. But we're probably nearer to seeing technology being used for more, well, I'd say things which are more around, I don't know, social engineering and other stuff, using this technology where perhaps in the past where you would have been really easy to spot someone trying to text you, email you and convince you to hand over cash. suddenly all these tools allow people, those human cyber criminals, to communicate in a way that they've got perfect English.
Yeah, that's a good
point. So don't be fearful of killer robots. Be fearful of evil people,
psychotic people leveraging
evil
the tools.
people using the tools, because that's I would start it going, let's solve those problems first. That's the immediate problem is people using these tools inappropriately, and then going to the yes absolutely consider sentience and what that means and how to combat. I say the word combat, but at least understand and best manage, and then. And remain, have the kill switch or have the control switch, but then consider that people have actually there's lots of people with ill intent.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They will use things in a bad ways. So I'd be considering, the ethics of humans is paramount, and that's the real concern today.
Yeah, and particularly because again we're like. The biblical stories, God created us in his own image. Well, that's what we're doing with AI, right? And at times our image isn't all that wonderful. So then what will come will be AI of some description and, the singularity perhaps. But in between, I guess I'm thinking that there's probably another step, particularly when we look at things like the emergence of autonomous robots and those sorts of things. More and more we see that, particularly in warehousing and logistics and things of that nature. Elon's working on what's his?
Yeah, it's like not Atlas. No, I know the one you're talking about.
Can't remember. Yeah. But it seems like when he puts his mind to something, we're going to end up with something. So is that something that we should be prepped for? Like the Autobot walking around the home. It's who was I speaking to? I was speaking to Peter Gray a few weeks ago, and he was highlighting that we are now at the time that the Jetsons was set in. And so Rosie, the old robot that would take care of the house, like we're pretty close to that, right? Like we should start seeing some of that stuff in the next decade or so.
Well, how much of our lives is automated today?
Yeah.
So there's you can now buy a equivalent of that, those kind of automated vacuums you can buy to vacuum your house. You can now buy that for your lawn.
Yeah.
They're expensive. They're $15,000.
I think we were talking about this. I drive past one on the way home from work, just plodding along the front of the house.
So I'm just like, that is a real kind of, that's I've got the latest technology and you haven't, or maybe they all have in whatever suburb. But it's that kind of, so automation might not look like physically shaped people, but it's absolutely there. There's robots who serve people in restaurants.
Yeah.
You think about it, we go through our checkouts now at major supermarket chains, and there's all this technology which surrounds us as we go through. Right now, in Coles and Woolworths, you happen to do it yourself. In the States,
you just walk out.
You walk out. It's like Amazon Go. It basically, through its own technology, you basically put all yourself into baskets, whatever, walk straight out, and it goes, yep, there's Josh Rowe. Tag, ting, bang, charge, you're out, gone. There's not even a cash register.
Yeah.
Like you're out. You don't have to. There's just no notion of having to physically take things in and out. You just walk out. So I think this notion of automation of technology and capability is just coming along, and the fact that there's, in my house we have, two kind of home assistant devices. We have a HomePod, Apple's, so basically Siri, which is not terribly smart. It's kind of good for playing music, basically. And then we have
not the best AI out there.
No, and then Google Assistant, which we find quite good for working things out and asking questions. Still not the best, but it's kind of it's reasonable. And so people are doing more and more around this technology, particularly linking at home and at work to using things. So it could be, turning on the lights. It could be, preparing things for when you arrive home or when you leave. Make it so that when I get home, the home is all at a certain temperature. So, this is, we're talking about
this is the stuff that we do.
This is your business.
Yeah, correct.
This is I think about all the years that you guys have been around and where things have gone from being very much physical touch to whether it's voice and it's the software, being not just about hardware, but being hardware software.
Yeah.
So it's that it's that movement from being just working on a hard push and a direct. There's an electrical current, voltage, a current going through a wire to now being the software. There's embedded software everywhere. And I had this amazing revelation the other day. I ran up a little Raspberry Pi at home running this little system called Home Assistant.
I use Home Assistant.
Amazing. And so I was gobsmacked at how many different devices lit up.
Yeah.
Like I literally, I knew about a whole bunch of stuff. And the reason why I ran this was because I wanted to just see how things like my solar system, my Tesla Powerwall and my EVs were just charging. And I wanted to see my energy usage.
Yeah.
What I didn't realise was the amount of devices that this thing picked up. My toothbrush, all my home assistant devices, my NAS, my
dishwasher,
every single device, and it just found them and was the ease which it could connect to them. Like I didn't have to provide credentials, but I'm like, this is amazing. And I first thought good, exciting, and my initial response was connect to them all. Then I've gone, hang on, do I really need to be connected to my toothbrush? No, I don't. No. And so I restarted the whole thing. I said, right, I'm just here for energy. But I also thought, well, hang on, there's real opportunities here for controlling and managing stuff. And a good friend of mine, a technology journalist, a gentleman by the name of Paul Woolbeck, said to me probably a decade ago now, I remember him saying to me, all these Internet of Things devices, because he asked back then, he's like, I wonder how many of them have thought about the security that's around them. And, what's going to happen? How many of them have literally just got the password admin and a known password? Because
on your security cameras and all that sort of stuff.
All that stuff, because what's going to happen, can people just drive down the street and access your own personal data and do things and whatever? I'm just like, and this is obviously beyond just AI I'm talking about, but it's home automation.
Yep.
And I'm just like, yeah. And it's like, that stuff that, Paul said to me all the way back then. I'm just like, yeah, that became so apparent to me that it's the ability to get inside and access systems. You almost need a DMZ around your home.
Well, I used to play a video game called Watch Dogs, and Watch Dogs it's like a hacker culture game, and you are fighting back against this thing called CTOS, which is City CTOS. So it's the operating system that runs the city. And you're hacking traffic lights and you're hacking security cameras and you're getting in through, buildings and opening doors. So the more that this stuff becomes centralized and governed that way, then the software becomes a risk. To your point earlier, our industry in particular is at this really interesting point now where for so many years we were based on hardware and then there was firmware, doing small little things, and now software creeps in and software becomes a thing to the point now where we see less and less hardware and software is becoming the experiential tool. For businesses that are looking to make moves into software strategy and understanding software as a whole, what do you need to do in a business to reframe what that looks like? If you've been built on being a hardware-centric for so long, how does a business make a decision to pivot and what things need to be considered?
So when I think about businesses which have made the most dramatic effect from going from hardware to being software, I think of this company.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, before the iPhone came along, you really had to rely on, things like, think about the competitors back then,
like the
BlackBerry
yeah.
and other devices which had physical keypads and other things around it, and they had a lifespan. This here is completely programmable.
Yeah.
And so over. It's all software. There's very few actual physical things to touch and change.
Yeah, it's really a piece of glass with some stuff inside.
It is software.
Yeah.
It's just, you've bought a screen. And so everything that sits around it is completely upgradable, changeable all the time. So I think, the more and more, I personally buy any devices in my home environment, I generally look for things which have as little as possible of the hardware integrated devices and as much as possible in software.
Yeah. So that it can adapt with you and
upgrade over time. Yeah. So sometimes you need to have some onboard hardware bits and pieces because it just makes sense to have it on board rather than up somewhere else in the cloud or wherever else. So that's fine. But it's So I suppose back to your question, Mike. When I think about what this means for businesses who've traditionally been in the hardware game, they need to adapt. And I'll give you a real example. I was in Kmart the other day. I noticed they're selling scales. They've got regular scales, which are just like analog dial. The next one, digital scales. And then the third one, and it's a scale where it's a full kind of body mass index and everything on it. And they've got, and we sell an app with that. And there's an app with that. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? And this is their home brand, Enco. Yeah. I'm just like, isn't this great? Now, who knows whether they've just white labeled some of the app or whatever else done, but I'm like, the people at Kmart are super smart there because they've basically gone, we recognise that this requires this is not a piece of technology that goes out the door by itself. Sorry, a hardware that goes out. It needs technology to run with it. Yep. We're doing that too. We'll do the technology play. Now, whether they play that onto a broader ecosystem play, who knows? They might have just made it.
But it is retention and stickiness, right? That's the other thing about hardware is because the box runs out. The software doesn't. The software, there's a new update or there's a new release or there's this new feature that we can stack on it for you. You can't add a new feature to a piece of hardware without it being really hard. Even the concept of, upgrading a PC back in the day, to your point, well, now we've got CPUs that we're going to outlast the software that's running on them by 3 or 4 generations. So you can hang on to that thing. And I love the way, to your point, that Apple have really become a software company. I remember using OS 6, 7, and 8 before anything really good was happening. And then OS 10 came and you sort of like, these guys are doing something really different with this operating system because Apple didn't care. They were a hardware manufacturer and the software was there. But now it's the thing that drives them.
And I think the other key thing I saw was that, and I think probably maybe it was around iOS 10 too, but the difference in being you've got to be connected to a physical computer to keep things backed up to now we're in the cloud. And so I can literally I can smash my iPhone, I can throw it in the bin, I can just walk into an Apple store and go, brand new phone, sign in with my iTunes, not my iTunes, what's it called now, iCloud account.
Yep.
And
it's all there.
And then, it just slurps up all the data and then it's like my phone was always there. That's my exact phone.
Yep.
Every single setting is there. Like it's,
It's your digital twin, right? It's you on standby.
I get more worried. I once left my iPhone in a taxi. I get more worried about losing my phone than I would losing my wallet.
I don't even carry a wallet anymore with anything like important in it because it's only 1 or 2 cards that haven't yet caught up to Apple Pay or whatever, but everything else is like once we get digital identity and thing, that's going to be the only device that you've got, which then comes with its own risks, What was that question going to be? I was going to ask something then and I forgot completely all about it. No, it slipped my mind. Tell me about what's happening in your world in the short term ahead. Are you looking more into what's going on with the emergence of AI? Is it about business and practice and incorporating into that? What is your really hot button for the next little while?
Yeah, so I'm really looking at practical uses of AI in kind of medium and large size businesses, and how it can affect real change and real opportunities right now. So it's about saying, right, whether it's the first steps an organisation might take, or whether it's they've already done some work and they want to take the next step, and so it's saying, okay, how can we use this, and what are the practical ways that we can use this? Sometimes that's literally around working out the right policies around that. Sometimes it's actually taking and getting doing a test and learn piece of work where you go, right, let's experiment with it. Let's see what it looks like and actually try something out, whether it's internally facing or externally facing. But it's exploring it and understanding it. So there's certainly a fair bit of education that I'm doing, and with different people I'm working with out there in different enterprises, but also actual practical work. We're actually delivering real outcomes where people can actually use the technology to actually deliver something that's valuable.
If you were a betting man and someone said, how long until we see a true AI, what would you be anticipating? I'm not going to hold you to it.
Yeah, so I would say that we actually have AI today, and AI will continue to, get better and better, over time, and we'll deal with different issues along the way. So, there's already businesses which are doing very well and delivering great outcomes using AI, and have been for many years. Previously it was AI being used very mathematically.
Yep.
So behind the scenes there was all these different things that just no one ever saw them. No one got to use a consumer grade version of AI, and particularly generative AI. So it was like, so it was mostly kind of enterprise grade versions of machine learning and AI that happened behind the scenes. So no one, it never went out and, so say Relays, for example, we never went out and then said, hey, we're all about AI, because it was just like no one knew what AI meant. So it's just like whatever, we use the word algorithm, and, it was more focused on the value it delivered. Mm-hmm. And so AI is definitely not new, and definitely not something, definitely is something that's delivering quantifiable value to consumers, enterprises, a whole lot. Over time, we'll keep on seeing it getting better and better at doing tasks and things that humans and others have, or potentially maybe were manual or harder to do, and it'll actually allow people to move up the value chain. And by that I mean it makes people work on become knowledge workers. So you go, right, on that stuff that might have taken me a whole lot of effort to craft, I can move up. Yeah. So one of the people in my team who's a product manager, she's rather than say crafting out user stories, user personas, things for an engineering squad, what I say to her is I say, right, use ChatGPT to do that, because generally what you want, but you get it to draft all the words, and you be the quality checker. That way you've got a little effectively you've got an associate working for you to get out a whole lot of content, get it in there and go. And she's like, oh, this is awesome. And she's just like, this is great. So like I've got my assistant now. And I go, yeah, of course you have. Use it as your assistant, but use it in the domains where you understand it.
Yeah.
Don't go and say, can you explain to me something to explain to the CEO where you're not sure about the content, whether it's right or not. Explain it do bits where you can check it. If you go outside of your field of expertise, you don't know if it's right. So, and maybe going back to your question, the perfect AI or the great AI is the one that is the self-learning, the self-checking. It's the one that goes, did I get it right? It's the one that goes, am I checking things? Have I considered perspectives? Whatever. And if anything, perhaps some of the AIs and I suppose the personas that might come out from AIs might even express different opinions.
Do we ever see true sentience? Do we ever see an artificial intelligence that is conscious?
I think sentience will arrive. There will be an artificial intelligence which will get to a stage where, and I believe it will be within my lifetime. Some people suggested within the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, well, the 2030s seem to be where everyone's landing, going it'll be sort of 2035 or thereabouts.
Toby Walsh has written a whole book on this, so it's a really good read on that. And he talks about a lot about that kind of future state. And, it's one of those ones where it's like, so it's kind of, I don't know enough about the underlying technology to go, yes, I can pin it at a certain decade, but I can definitely tell you now it's not there. Yeah. So I know it's not there. I know it's not there, but whether there's there's always more work being done at an academic level and a research level that might be certainly further ahead than where we are.
Either way, when it arrives, it's going to be the biggest thing I think we've ever seen, right? In the history of anything that we've ever done. It's really about what happens after that.
So in my career, apart from I literally equate the advent of AI and generative AI equivalent to the initial boom of the internet. That's the quantification. That's the size of the change I'm seeing now from a technology and kind of social change point of view. And I've been through all these other different changes, whether it's the e-com boom or other kind of key tech changes. But the advent of the internet and AI and generative AI are in my view, the two biggest things I've seen. And I wouldn't say that lightly. I wouldn't just call it. For me, I don't just jump on bandwagons. They're substantially, substantial changes.
Well, if all goes wrong, it could be the last big invention that we ever came up with as well, right? It could be the final one. Josh, that's it. That's that's been a good chat. We got to do this again because we could probably stay here for another 2 hours and just keep riffing. We will have some information on you in the comments, just for people to follow up if they want to reach out and ask any questions or anything like that. But I think let's do it again. We probably need to do it at least once a year because it's moving that quick. So we'll pencil something in and we'll see you again soon. But thanks so much for your time. It's been great.